How to create professional images of subjects on white background using only, and now hold your breath, the flashlight of one single smartphone. And without the help of Photoshop, straight out of camera. My name is Amri, Amri on Instagram, and today I challenge you to get out of your comfort zone in this #CameraheadChallenge. This is the first of a series of videos where we will create images together. I give you exercises, and while you complete them, you will start understanding the camera settings without even realizing that you're learning. That's how we all wish school would have been, right? Enjoying the learning process while doing practically relevant stuff. Once you're done, it would be amazing if you posted your images using the #CameraheadChallenge anywhere on Instagram or Facebook so that I can have a look. Make me proud, show me your images, and see if we can make these challenges viral. Let's start. What we obviously need is a subject. I will use an apple because we also have our apple on black challenge, so let's stick with that. A white wall as a background. I have painted mine green for all my green screen videos, so I'm going to use a roll of seamless paper. Then we need something white to put our subjects on. A white piece of paper would work, but something that is a tiny bit reflective would be even better. I use this tabletop of an IKEA coffee table. If you use paper instead, take several layers to not have your background shine through. Using paper might require to do a little editing to get it perfectly white. I will put the apple right at the edge of the table. That will help to get the surface 100% white. Then we will need an additional piece of paper for later use. And of course, a flashlight. I'm going to use the one on my smartphone for that, but you can also use a bigger one if you have. Since we're going to use very long shutter speeds, you need to make sure your camera is on something solid. A tripod will be perfect, but have a look at my boredom fighting series that I will link at the end of the video, where I used boxes, piles of books and whatnot. Photography is all about creative use of things. Doing all sorts of workarounds helps you get a better understanding of photography in general. Having said that, it is of course easier to shoot subjects on white background using professional lighting equipment. But first, it is not nearly as fun. Second, many of you don't even have all that equipment at home. And third, you don't learn half of what you learn being creative like we are today. Back to our setup. Make sure you have a bit of a distance between the subject and the white background. That makes it easier to evenly light the background with a flashlight. Next, I will focus on my subject while the room lights are on. When I've done that, I set it to manual focus. Why do I do that? In a minute, I will switch off the lights and the camera will try to focus again. Without the light, it might not be able to, and you will end up with even no image at all because it won't let me press the shutter or an out of focus shot. Finally, I set my camera to 2-second self-timer to not have to touch it while it takes the image. How about the exposure settings? We will use manual exposure. Don't freak out, just follow my instructions. We will narrow it down using trial and error. Even I don't have an idea how much light output my flashlight has, so I'll set my camera, take a test shot, adapt the settings, and take another test shot. First things first, I want a pretty long shutter speed, so I set the cam to 10 seconds. Don't mix that with 1/10 of a second. We need 10 seconds. If possible, I would love to stay at the base ISO level of my camera for the least amount of noise. And a decent aperture of f11 to get much of my image in focus. That's pretty much to ask for from the small amount of light in our flashlight, but let's see where that gets us. Now I will switch off the lights. By the way, I forgot, it has to be really dark in the room, otherwise this will not work. We want to have control over all the light in the room. I activate the flashlight on my smartphone, press the shutter button, and while the camera exposes the image, remember that was 10 seconds, I paint the background and only the background with the flashlight. That's how you usually approach a shot on white. You first make sure that the background is white. Make sure to move it around a lot to get an evenly lit background rather than some hotspots. Paint more often on the sides, left and right in your frame, because every lens has some natural vignetting. So the image is naturally darker there. And most of all, make sure to not spill any light on your subject. Only paint on the background. And this is what we get. A medium bright greenish background and a dark subject. That dark subject was to be expected since we only painted the background yet, but the greenish color cast may surprise the one or the other. That's because our flashlight isn't purely white, pretty common in LEDs. So we need to get rid of that. If you like editing and you shoot RAW, you know that you can easily change that in your editing software. Check out my video RAW versus JPEG if you're interested. If you don't like to edit, you need to get it right in camera and set a custom white balance. To know how exactly that works, let me recommend downloading a PDF of your camera manual and use the search function in your PDF viewer to easily search for white balance. After I set the white balance correctly and took another test shot, our image looks like this. Our next issue with the image is that the background isn't bright enough. We will shoot on white, not on grey. To make it brighter, we can use a longer shutter speed, so let's do that and double the shutter speed. That should give me twice the brightness. And then I repeat the shot. I save you the waiting time for the light painting. Here is the image. Still too dark. Remember, we are shooting subjects on white background, so we need the background to become really white. I could further extend the shutter speed, but our camera has a limit of 30 seconds, and we need the last 10 seconds for something else. We will get to that in a minute. What else could we do to brighten the image? We could choose a lower f number, which would of course lead to less depth of focus. And/or we can increase ISO. I'll first do the latter and raise ISO, which is the gain, as people who watched my photography course know, because I want the aperture to stay at f11 for a bigger depth of focus. A test shot shows still not enough, so I need to make it even brighter. And now we again learn something. Since photography is all about light and I don't have more light available, I need to make compromises. If the light is low, I cannot just say I want a low ISO, a high f number and a certain shutter speed. That's not how photography works. We need to adapt our settings to the available light, so I need to make a compromise. So I will next lower the f number. That will open the aperture a bit to let more light into the camera. And we finally get a white background. On a side note, I could of course use a stronger light source instead, like this flashlight. But I want to stick with what most of you have at home, so we will continue using the smartphone. And in real life, if you're out shooting a landscape, you cannot magically switch on a light either. You have to take what you get and work with that. My YouTube photography course will make you understand if you don't already. Back to the image. If yours isn't completely white, you can raise ISO or lower the f number further. Do some experimenting until you get the background really white. If you wonder how to find out if it's really white, either you know your display really well and know if it shows accurate brightness. By the way, this is the chance to compare the brightness of your screen to the brightness of your bigger monitor. Or, since we need 100% white background, this is the perfect occasion to use the histogram. More on that in a separate video I will link at the end. So much for the background. But how do we light our subject? It's actually pretty easy. We will extend our shutter speed to 30 seconds now. I will use the first 20 seconds to paint on the background just as we did before. I'll set the time on my smartphone for those 20 seconds, and while the shutter is still open, I will change to the front to light my subject. Here it is also important to not hold the flashlight still, but rather draw with the light as if you would fill a big rectangle. One important note. If you're not on a very solid ground, but for example on wood or something, don't move like crazy. That might shake the apple, which is not what you want. Rather gently and slowly use the 10 seconds to paint that rectangle. Okay, that's pretty cool already. It's a bit bright though, and the shadows look a bit harsh. What can we do? I'm going to diffuse the light of the smartphone with a piece of paper, but only for the last 10 seconds. So for the first 20 seconds we paint on the white background without the paper, and when we change to the subject we hold the paper in front of the light. That way we will keep the light on the background, but we'll have less light on the foreground. Plus, the diffusion will give a softer shadow. You can either use that technique to light from the top or from the front, respectively slightly from the side. The images you get are pretty cool. If your apple is too dark, repeat the shot and get closer with the light. That will make it brighter, but pay attention, half the distance, 4 times the light. Before we make it even cooler, did you click on the like button yet? You would help me big time rank higher in YouTube searches if you do. But don't lie if it wasn't helpful. But maybe it is even good enough to subscribe and hit the notification bell. Finally, let's add some eye candy. I will first oil the apple with some olive oil to make it more glossy and, even more important, make the apple skin water repellent for our next step. Spray the apple with a mix of glycerin and water to get a really fresh look. I will link you to glycerin and a sprayer in the description. Time for another shot. And if you want to make it pop a bit in Lightroom, here is a quick screenshot for my settings. I will list them in the description if you're interested. Don't forget to carefully wash or peel the apple if you eat it afterwards. And don't forget to show me your images under the hashtag cameraheadchallenge. See you next time.